So I'm looking over this. This is the editorial that I referenced earlier from National Review. Democrats propose lawlessness and call it immigration policy. On immigration, as on so much else, the Democrats have become the party of Obama, only more so. Because Wednesday's debate was co-hosted by Spanish language network Univision, and the questioning spearheaded by Jorge Ramos, an immigration activist masquerading as a journalist, there was little doubt that the evening would feature what Hillary Clinton's detractors have derisively labeled hispandering. But Clinton and her remaining challenger Bernie Sanders effectively promised an end to American immigration law. That means we can have more people like that fellow who shot up, what was it, 5, 6 people. We missed the fact that we were going to have him deported. Sorry. Actually, according to the Daily Caller today, he had 2 outstanding warrants. And we just discovered this part of this, and yet he was allowed to run roughshod, and a lot of Americans are dead today because of this. And we're told, yes, but it's the right thing to do because we have such big hearts. We, by the way, as if everyone agrees with the leftists on this one. 8:45, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Caller with us, and you're on the air.
Yeah, good morning. I know you mentioned a guy that was in prison for a video from Benghazi. Perhaps you could make a prisoner swap for him with Bo Bergdahl. They could trade places. Thank you.
That's a wonderful thought. Bo could go to prison and make all sorts of videos. I don't know that we'd want to watch them, but here I am weaving baskets today, just like my mommy and daddy taught me how to do. Tomorrow I'm going to go outside and paint some flowers on the prison vans. Daily Caller reporting this. It was reported early Wednesday that the suspect in the killings, Pablo Serrano Vitorino, slipped through ICE hands following Immigration and Customs Enforcement, slipped through ICE hands following a traffic arrest in September in Overland Park, Kansas. It says that's egregious enough that they were unable to, because they claim they made a mistake in calling the wrong agency to pick him up. It has since come to light that ICE was notified in June that Serrano Vitorino had been arrested in Colorado for domestic battery. This was a guy who was he was deported once in 2004. Why is he back? Because the border is a sieve, and Lefty doesn't care. John Fear, a legal analyst at the Center for Immigration Studies, says that the Serrano-Vitorino case highlights the federal government's failure to control the border. Clearly, our borders are wide open, he said. We don't even know when this guy came in. I went to Walmart shopping the other day. I don't do that very often, but it's near my new home. And I was driving home and realized I needed a couple of quick things, and it was the closest stop. So I decided to pull into the parking lot, run inside, grab 2 or 3 small things that I needed. And I got up, if you're familiar with the store, and everyone claims they don't go there, but you're all familiar. It's like saying, I never eat at McDonald's. Baloney. Or I never watch TV. All right, now we know you're a liar. You must be a Democrat. How can you tell a Democrat's lying? Their mouth is moving. Boom, boom. So I walked into Walmart, I get my things, and I came up to the counter, and there's 2 guys who barely speak English, just trying to get through. I mean, I'm a little sympathetic to the fact I've been places, too, where I don't know the language. I've been up to Quebec sometimes, and I've been in somewhat the minority. But usually you can find someone in a place like that can help you out there. There's a mix of languages there, and somebody else speaks English. But these 2 guys were arguing with the clerk. Apparently they both went through line, but they split their goods up, and then one paid for his and the other paid for his. But they couldn't read the slip. When they got the slip back, the receipt, they couldn't read it. Now, my guess is they can't even read in their own native language. So they're trying to read this slip with a bunch of numbers and English words on it, and they're completely lost, and they wanted to keep arguing with her, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and there's a moment where you want to say, hey, do you guys have green cards? But they wouldn't even know what you were talking about if they have that much difficulty with the language. So I finally, after they left, I finished paying, and as I'm walking out, I see a couple of women walk in who clearly, this little United Nations we're building here in the Magic Valley, they come walking in these big yellow sarongs and yellow wrapped around their heads, and they're speaking a language that I'm not aware of. They're some of our East African immigrants. Nicer people than some of those who might come here from directly in the Middle East. And we're not making that up. We've talked about that already. We'll talk more about that a little later in the program, too, as well. some of the things that are going on in Europe with refugees that are not getting reported in this country. Some of the abominations are just. And yet, we've got a gang here in town that keeps saying, no, but it's the right thing to do, and we're not that kind of people. We wouldn't deny them. And let them grope your little girls then. Let them rape your little girls then, but don't let them do it to mine. 849. I don't want them doing it to yours either, but why would you want them to do it? It's 46. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But to end that story, I watched the two women walk in the entrance. At least they got that right, because entrance and exit. You know what? Most of our local people can't get that squared. I noticed at that store. But then I got up to the exit doors, and the same two guys are standing there looking and chattering away and looking at their receipts, still trying to figure it out. And I guess they felt that the clerk somehow had done them wrong, but the clerk, is just trying to move people along. The computer counts up the scanned items, and there you go. And it's just the frustration that they have, but it's also frustrating for everyone else around them as they gum up the system. Or you go to Fred Meyer and you want to run up to the service counter for some tiny thing, and it's remittance day, and they're sending all of this stuff back home, and you stand there and you wait, and you wait. And then they need the translator to come along because of the confusion. Or perhaps they do understand, but they figure if they keep trying to pretend they're confused, somehow they're going to get a break. But I'm telling you right now, we've got to figure out a way to make, at least if they're coming, make that transition a little smoother for them. Maybe we ought to have a requirement that if they come here and they'd like to stay, that they should know at least some acceptable, a certain level of the English language. We've got a telephone caller with us. I should note the number if you'd like to reach the program today, 736-0300, 736-0300. Also, bill.colley@townsquaremedia.com, the email address. And you're up next. You're on the air on KLIX.
Yes, I live in the city limits, and I have a rather big 5 acres in city limits, 4 acres of lawn. I have lots of equipment. I'm a contractor, and I have a big pile of wood that I intend to use. All hell breaks loose, I can burn wood and at least keep warm and cook food. And I need to split it, but it's sitting there. One day I drive back into my property, and there's a Hispanic fellow standing there next to the wood, and he's decided that I don't need it or something. And it was like, you're in my yard, sir. This is trespassing. Well, but you see, it just doesn't register with him. I had a Hispanic gentleman tell me once that if things got bad enough, he would have to start stealing and robbing and to support his family. And I thought, this kind of, I'm going to tell you right now, I have tons of Hispanic clients that are very in love with the American dream, willing to work as hard as anybody I've ever seen. So don't call me prejudiced, but this is the thing. There are certain parts that are just out there, and like Michael Savage says, language, culture, and whatever the hell else he says, and we're losing it. And I'll hang up, Bill. Thanks.
Hey, thank you for the call. And the testimonies, we could spend days taking testimonies from people who have had issues with all of this. And once more, the panty waist, the liberals would prefer that we just, that we take the abuse because it makes them feel better. Of course, most of them live in gated communities on a certain end of town where they don't have to deal with it anywhere near as much. You're next. You're on the air on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com.
Yeah, good morning. It's interesting. The illegal alien killed people, had been deported and so forth. Well, it used to be illegal aliens, then it was undocumented immigrants.
Yes.
Now they're just calling them foreign nationals. You notice how the transition...
George Orwell would understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah, there's all this newspeak stuff and so forth. But in our U.S. Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, it says that our Congress, our elected officials, even our state officials, take an oath to uphold that Constitution. It says that they're to protect us from invasion. And it doesn't say military invasion. It says invasion. And they knew what they were talking about then, because the Islam problem had been going on for centuries, and they were well aware of us. And Jefferson and Washington, Franklin, they all were aware of this thing. And here we are being invaded by these illegals, not only across the border, but certainly from the almost 2 million Muslims have come into this country. They're not assimilating. They're taking our jobs. And that's another thing. We don't have enough jobs for the people we have now because of all these bad trade agreements, and we're about to pass another one. So, I mean, folks, wake up. And this is why Donald Trump, I just read a deal by David Limbaugh making this analysis. It was excellent as to why Donald Trump is where he is, because the establishment, by their lack of action, has made and developed Donald Trump into what he is.
Yeah. And thank you for the call. And President Obama yesterday said he was not responsible for Trump's rise, but the fact that he got the question, because yes, it's the establishment in both those parties that is responsible for the rise of Donald Trump. 8:54, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 47. And a book written by Rick Santorum called Blue Collar Republicans was read by Donald Trump, and Santorum wrote about how the party had let those people down. Trump read the book, become his blueprint for his campaign. And all these other Republicans just keep believing, you know what, we're just going to shut him up, we'll shut you up, and you'll do as we say. That's not the way that America works, or it's not supposed to work that way. Well, it does work that way. We know that. It's been working that way for years, and there go Donald Trump, right? Or ergo Donald Trump. The grammarians out there will be after me about that. When our caller referenced the Orwellian speak in all of this, this comes from the Christian Science Monitor. You know if it's a liberal publication when it says, a group of California leaders had a message for the Supreme Court Tuesday, unfreeze President Obama's executive action that could give legal presence up to half the nation's 11 million undocumented immigrants. No, they are illegal aliens. They broke the law coming here. Again, a guy who's selling crack on the street corner is not your undocumented pharmacist. But if you're a leftist, this is how you get around that, and you figure if you tell the big lie long enough, borrowing from Joseph Goebbels and a lot of other people who have run totalitarian regimes, that someone is going to buy your baloney. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Good morning, Bill. The lady that was giving you problems the other day over your description of Hillary, she was saying you weren't Christian in what you were doing. Christ himself called the leader of the people, Herod, a fox, which is an unclean animal. So I guess in this case, you'd probably be proper to call Hillary a Arkansas Redhound.
Thank you. Look, if you're calling out Lucifer, because she's not Satan, but let's say she's an agent of, do you stop and do it politely? This is the thing. As a talk radio show host, I've used this analogy for years. The leftists get really upset with me, and usually the pressure begins after I've been on the air about a year and a half. The calls that, I must be removed because I'm poisoning the community. In other words, we don't want people to hear what you're saying. It's a little bit like this. Let's say you're running a store downtown, and, it's a pretty good business district, and everything's going well for a while, and then one day you notice across the street that there's a new storefront open, and you realize the guy over there with the horns and the pitchfork, he's the devil. And, you're standing in your store and you're realizing this might not be a good thing in the neighborhood. But he doesn't mind as long as you're silent. As long as you don't say anything, he goes about his business, you go about your business. But then one day, if you walk outside and you point across the street and you start shouting to passersby, that's the devil over there. Don't go into that store. Stay away from him. That's the devil. And you start doing it publicly, the devil gets very, very angry. And in talk radio, we've been dealing with the devil for a very, very long time. And as well, his allies here in our communities. 8:58, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Cliff Katona, a retired Idaho State police detective, is going to be joining us in the next half hour. He's a challenger in the Republican primary to Twin Falls County Sheriff Tom Carter. And we're going to ask him in the next half hour just why he's decided to do this. That's on the way right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.